This lecture is on smell. So smell is a chemical sense, as is taste. So it helps us to perceive chemicals in our environment, including in our food. So how the sense of smell works. The ability to smell comes from specialized sensory cells that are called olfactory sensory neurons. And these neurons then are found in a small patch, that's a C, a small patch of tissue high inside the nasal passages of the nose. And now this is kind of amazing. These cells connect directly to the brain. It's kind of amazing, really. So each olfactory neuron has one odor receptor. So molecules that are released by substances around us. So for example, coffee brewing. There's something that is happening around us. Or maybe pine trees as you pass them. So these molecules that are released by these various substances around us then stimulate these receptors. And once the neurons detect these molecules, they send messages to your brain, which identifies the smell. So here's the thing. There are more smells in the environment than there are receptors, olfactory receptors. So any given molecule may stimulate a combination of receptors thereby creating a unique representation in the brain. And these representations, basically these patterns of receptors that are stimulated then, these patterns of receptors that are stimulated then are registered by the brain as a particular smell. So, as I said, one pattern of receptors being stimulated will smell like pine trees, or will then be labeled as that's the pine tree smell. Another pattern of receptors that are stimulated will then be labeled as, oh, that's the coffee brewing smell. So that is how then smells wind up being perceived by our brains as specific different kinds of smells. So then there's the whole question of getting the smell to those receptors. When we inhale, when we smell something. So smells reach the olfactory sensory neurons through two pathways. And in a sense, you already know this because you have studied the respiratory system, but we will spell it out anyway. So first of all, these smells that you inhale will come directly through your nostrils and then onto the sensory neurons. But then also through the nasopharynx. Which, after all, is a channel that connects, I will call it the roof of your throat, to the nose. Basically, if you eat something or you inhale a smell, it's going to go into your pharynx, and then from your pharynx, if you breathed in through your mouth, let's say you breathe in through your mouth, it's going to go back to your pharynx, and from there it can go up into the nasopharynx and basically backwards up to the sensory neurons that are high up in your nose. I'll draw you a picture of this in a moment. But more often, as I said, they take the direct route where you breathe in through your nostrils and the smells go directly to your olfactory sensory neurons. So, chewing food then releases aromas that access the olfactory sensory neurons through the second, that is to say, the nasopharyngeal channel. You've got food in your mouth, you chew it, and tiny molecules are then released and they waft into your pharynx, and some of them can rise up and wind up getting to your sensory neurons that way, or specifically your smell sensory neurons that way. And if the channel is blocked, such as when your nose is stuffed up by a cold or the flu, then odors can't reach. The sensory cells. That are stimulated by smell. You're familiar with this. When you have a really, really stuffy nose, you wind up being unable to smell. So just carrying on with what I said there. So as a result, you lose much of your ability to smell, and therefore your ability to enjoy a food's flavor. Because your senses of smell and taste work closely together. These are both chemical senses. As I said, they work together and enhance your sense of flavor and of food. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and draw you a few pictures now of where you will find your olfactory sensory neurons. So this is a bit tough. Let's do this now. So here we have, here we have your forehead and somebody's nose and further down. Okay. So you're going to have smell coming in here. Obviously, you know that. Now, what's important is that up here, this is roughly speaking where your brain is resting. Let's do this. So the brain, I'm not going to draw much of it. Your brain rests inside your skull. You know that. And then we have bone out here. I'm not going to draw in all the bone, but the point is this is bone. And you have the nasal bones in your nose as well, as you doubtless know. And then we have these large air passages here. Maybe I can do air passages. I can do air in blue. Give me a moment here. So basically, here you're going to have your nasal passages. Down here you're going to have the mouth. It has a separate set of passages. So we have bone kind of in here. This is diagrammatic, but here we have bone, and you have the mouth down here, and then here, of course, you are going to have the oral cavity. But what I am getting at here is specifically your nasal passages. They come up here. Here we've got bone going right up to where the brain is, and then it kind of goes down again, and various other things happen that I'm not going to get into right now. But what I'm getting at is this crucial place right in here. This is actually porous. There are holes here. Here you have the brain. And specifically, I hope you remember this from learning about the skull. I will do it here. No, I won't. Let's do it here. So when you were studying the brain and you studied, when you were studying the skull, rather, and you looked at the skull, you should have seen this bit here. This is the cribriform plate, and it has little holes in it that go from the brain to, and I'm going to do this in blue here. So here we have the various different nasal passages, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on the nasal passages specifically, but the point is you breathe in air through your nostrils. Here we are, here's air coming in. The air goes all through the nasal passages, but the air also goes up to and interacts with what we have right here in the brain. Here's the brain, and specifically we have this portion of the brain, which I'm doing in purple here. You see that portion of the brain there? That portion of the brain then is the olfactory bulb of the brain right around the cribriform plate, leading to the olfactory tract, which is going to be hard for me to draw, but let's say that it's that. It's actually further down. Let's do this right. So here, then, we will have, along the bottom there, that is the olfactory tract. So this area with the holes in the skull is the cribriform plate. I will even say this is inside the skull. Go take a look at your textbook or your lab manual. Look at the skull. You can find the cribriform plate. This will all make sense then. And basically then, here you have the smell-laden air coming up and interacting here with these things here. So here then, this then, to put this, here we have some things coming through, and these then are the olfactory. Maybe I should do a different color for these. Let's do that. So here we will have this green. And these are the olfactory areas of the nasal There we go. That is not too bad. That shows you then, so you have the olfactory areas in the nasal cavity, you have the cribriform plate that allows the communication, you have the olfactory bulb up above here. So here is where you then have the air interacting with these little chemical sensors right in here at the very top of the nasal passages. Those chemical sensors interact directly with the brain with the olfactory bulb of the brain. And the other thing to keep in mind in all of this is that second passage, which I will do in blue, but I hope you remember that in addition then to the direct passage here, how to do this, because you have all of the nasal conchae and all. What I'm getting at is that you will then also have back here, of course, you have the pharynx into which air can flow, but that includes then air actually coming up from the mouth. Here's the mouth. And of course, you can have air coming in the mouth, going to the pharynx. And you will then have this, which is then, this then is the second root, I guess is the way to put it. This is the second root of smells to the olfactory areas of the nasal cavity by way of the nasopharynx. So you're gonna chew your food. Those smells then are going to wind up going into the pharynx, wafting up into the nasopharynx, which is above the oropharynx, as you recall. And those two can then wind up influencing how you taste something, because you wind up getting smell involved from the food that's in your mouth. I hope that this is making sense. And that then is it for this lecture on the taste of smell.